Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this Idle Skill Up session brought to you by PeopleCert. My name is Cody, and I'd love to welcome you back to another Techstrong learning experience. But before we get things started, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review with you. First of all, today's session is being recorded. So if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch at a later time, or if you'd like to share with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the on-demand recording shortly after we conclude our live session today. Now, if you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which you'll find on the right side of your screen. So if you see that chat tab, I'd like to have you warm that up for us by letting us know from where in the world you are joining. Seeing Colombia and lots of hellos. So I'd like to see some locations in there as well. Now, if you have any questions for us during our program today, we do want you to send those into the Q&A tab, as sending your questions to the Q&A tab just helps us keep track, and we want to address as many of your questions as we can. So that's really appreciated from our end. Additionally, if you check out the handout section, you'll see there is a link to sign up for our next Idle Skill Up session. There's also a podcast link for SolarWinds Tech Pod. And I believe Matt also has another resource in there for you as well that I'm sure he'll enlighten you to as we progress throughout our program today. So our topic is how service management helps drive sustainability. And I'm joined by Matt Barron, Senior Product Marketing Specialist at Invigate, Sean Sebring, Solutions Architect for ITSM at SolarWinds, and leading our conversation is our very own Bonnie Schneider, Sustainability and Climate Contributor here at Techstrong Group. So Matt and Sean, thank you so much for joining us today. Bonnie, would you like to go ahead and take it from here?
Yes, thank you so much, Cody, and thanks for everyone from all over the world joining us now. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. As Cody mentioned, I am the Sustainability and Climate Contributor to the Techstrong Group, and I'm the author of the book, Taking the Heat, How Climate Change Can Affect Your Mind, Body, and Spirit, and What You Can Do About It. So definitely focused on sustainability today, and I'm really excited about this panel and this webinar. So welcome, of course, to today's webinar titled How Service Management Helps Drive Sustainability. This is part of PeopleCert Skill Up. And as we all know, sustainability has become a pivotal issue in our ongoing efforts to combat climate change. IT teams are leading the charge, striving to make operations more energy efficient and spearheading digital business transformation initiatives for a sustainable future. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by two esteemed experts in the field of service management, and I am delighted to introduce them both to you now. First, we have Matt Barron, who's the Senior Product Marketing Specialist at Invigate, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, with over 20 years of experience in service management. Matt has served in various capacities, from the service desk to being a consultant and experienced designer. He is known for challenging industry norms and introducing innovative approaches to service management. Matt is also the host of the Ticket Volume podcast and is a sought-after speaker at conferences where he shares insights on improving service experiences and team collaboration. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Welcome,
Great.
Matt.
Thank you,
Sean is next, another esteemed person to speak. Sean Sebring is the Solutions Architect, ITSM at SolarWinds. Well, no one may call him Mr. Idle, he says. Everyone who's worked with Sean knows he has a deep passion for Idle and IT service management best practices. With his background in IT support, project management, and process improvement, Sean is dedicated to enhancing service management processes and practices. Now, Sean is also the host of the podcast SolarWinds Tech Pod. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can see the link is also on our panel and presenters. And of course, subscribe to Matt's podcast too. We've got two great podcasts now that you can sign up for. And if you love podcasts, it's always good to get some new ones on there. Well, first, I'd like to welcome you both and welcome everyone again from all over the world joining us on this panel. And now I'd like to dive into our discussion for today, but keep your questions going in the chat and we will get to those as well. First, this question really is for you both, and Matt, you can start. I would like for each of you to share how your experience in service management has influenced your approach to driving sustainability in IT operations.
Excellent start, because that really is the point of operations. Once you've got something working, let's keep it working, right? We're beyond just the environmental, social governance, the ESG of sustainability. It's just sustaining operations. How do we actually keep stuff going? How do we keep the lights on? That's what I think about when I think about service management. So often it's about just staying productive, staying revenue positive, and really building a great technology experience. So, of course, it makes sense that so much of what we do in service management ties back to, making sure that we're keeping the lights on and thinking about how we can do that in better ways. So, of course, sustainability always comes up.
And you just mentioned a phrase I was going to use, keeping the lights on. When I think about sustainability, of course, I had actually someone I used to report to who had two things he would say is sustainable and scalable, right? We need to make sure we're capable for both. But talking about the sustainability and little things that influence that from an operations standpoint, it's where can we leverage the technology that we have today? And keeping the lights on was funny to me because one of the first things that I think of, right, and I'm a visual thinker, is I walk into a room and the lights turned on, meaning they weren't on when I wasn't there, right? So little things matter. And just leveraging smart technology that's available to everyone nowadays to help maintain that sustainability and, again, reduce that carbon footprint where at all possible. And secure, yes. I see from the audience, sustainable, scalable, and secure. Yes, cannot forget security. Thank you.
Great. That's a great way to start. All right. And this is also for each of you to answer. And this time I'll start with Sean. What are some of the methodologies and strategies that can be employed to heighten energy efficiency in the IT domain, Sean?
So one of the things that I first think of when I talk about this is a blessing in disguise. There was a tragic pandemic that's taken place in the last 5 years that we've all kind of experienced. And one of the silver linings that we can take from that is the work from home, the more remote world that we live in now. And that had some pros, some cons, some benefits, some tragic, consequences. But things that I think that we learned that we, as IT professionals, at least personally, I knew was possible, but larger businesses didn't expect was possible or even is attainable as we thought, was how efficient you can be working from home, right? And think about not just the technology that we're saving, right? Keeping the lights on, no longer do we have to power a building 24/7 if we've got the majority of our personnel working out of their own home, which would have its lights on 24/7 anyway. But the carbon from vehicles, transportation, right? The amount of reduced traffic on the road because of remote work. This has had a major impact, in my personal opinion, on how we can view things. And it has continued to trend in the sense that as we've returned to office, right, the RTO, that many organizations are still kind of discussing what is their new policy for. Most that I've seen that are high technology industries, or at least highly adopted technology organizations, have maintained a sense of work from home, whether it's a 60-40 split in your time in the office, and the amount of impact that has on your energy consumption is massive. Because again, if I think about when I'm working from home, my lights are on anyway, right? My family stays at home. I have young kids and my wife maintains the house. So lights are on anyway. AC's keeping the house cool for us. So that's one less person taking up space and electricity in an office where it's already going to be consumed at home.
That's a great point. I was just asking the audience to see how many people are working from home. But
I'm curious as well.
Sean, I just want to also say, I don't know if you all remember this, it was in 2020, but there was a picture of what the sky looked like without all the cars on the road when we were all at home. And it was so blue and clear because we didn't have all that pollution. So I think you make a really good point that this change that we've seen and how different it could be in terms of energy saving. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And It's those details that are really going to add up. 82% of what a car uses for gas is to move the car, not the person. So why are we spending all this time and polluting in such a way to just bring people to a physical location? This webinar is a perfect example. We don't have to fly people from Ghana and Myanmar and Spain all together to have this conversation. We can have these conversations in new ways, and changing the way that we think about things and whether they're on or not, is that good or not? I think about the amount of photos that we save as a collective humanity and how much energy it takes to keep those stored and instantly available. It's kind of disappointing in a little bit, because of course we want to save our photos. They're personal, and that's kind of where this becomes an emotional thing. It's always tough when a business has to think about emotions. We see this in experience design all the time. Um, how people feel as employees and as customers and as partners to a company impacts whether we want to continue buying from them. And so the same thing goes for the decisions about how we store our data. Do we want our ERP system running all the time when people never log in 2 to 6 a.m.? There's no way someone's going to log in. Well, maybe there's some things that we can do in that last mile to spin down those systems. And then when someone hits the login screen, we start spinning up the systems, right? I've hit the login screen. I'm fat fingering my password for a little bit, and then instantly the ERP is on. I can get what I need. So there's lots of different ways to think about this. The key is, though, we have to decide to want it first. That has to be something that has to be brought down on the service designers, on the product designers, and on our companies as a whole to say, is this who you want to be?
I just wanted to address some of the comments in the chat discussing, first of all, traffic. I've got feels for you. I'm an Austinite, so Austin, Texas, and traffic has been abysmal in many ways. Immediately on the mandatory everyone stay home. Of course, it was better. I think there's improvements that happened, but then following that statement, someone had mentioned, we're kind of still at a place where our organization's pushing to get people back in office. I hear you. Encourage them to look at articles, at publications, at things that can help justify decisions. And ultimately, the organization needs what the organization needs. But it's something worth pursuing, worth pushing for. And hopefully that organization that you're part of does ask for your voice and opinion, and you can express that, because there's also major mental health. And Bonnie mentioned this as part of it in the introduction, but the impact on mental health with the adjustments to work from home has been tremendous as well. So it's not just a energy factor. I totally understand being part of sales. Butts and seats is a big deal, especially if you're a publicly traded company. Shareholders are concerned seeing employees not in the office. So these are more things to think about and consider, but encourage and don't give up your voice when talking about that. Again, not saying that work from home is right for every organization, but if you feel that that's what's good for your organization, and continue to push for it. Always want to strive for optimism. I actually have a phrase I'll shamelessly plug here. It's on my LinkedIn and I live by it, but optimism inspires success. So without a positive attitude, you're just condemning yourself for failure.
I don't want to move past this very quickly, because this is such an important point, Sean, that it's a decision that needs to be made, and it's not a comfortable one, right? Going fully remote from being fully in person was not comfortable. It was necessary. And the same can be said for our consumer choices. Using plastic, yes, it's convenient. Where does it go? And you see, I read a Wall Street Journal article yesterday about how fast fashion is going away because people in the countries where Americans and the rest of the world are buying inexpensive clothing from aren't willing to work in factories at low wages anymore. And that I believe is a good thing, right?
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
And the impact is that the prices will go up. I'll have to pay more for shirts. And for me personally, that's a good thing because I want those people to be treated fairly. I want the ecosystem to be treated fairly, and I'm willing to pay the price for it. Now, that will cause some conflicts and consternation in our market, and inflation will be affected, and pay will be affected, and humans will be affected.
There will definitely be chaos. But another factor for that, and I love you brought that up, Matt, is waste. Talking about waste with inexpensive, tossable shirts, if we're talking about fashion, just something that's easy throwaway, right? It's a lot of swag that people get, talking about events like this. And don't get me wrong, I love a swag shirt. Most of my closet is things I didn't buy, but came from events or companies. But to your point, if it's not as cost effective anymore to just buy hundreds and hundreds, thousands of shirts and say, here you go, that's an element of waste too. The production of those shirts, which includes industry technologies and all sorts of stuff. We're making what is necessary rather than what is frivolent, I suppose, is just throwaway stuff. And that's going to play into probably, and I am almost certain, part of our conversations later throughout this discussion is throwaway technologies too.
That's true. And I have, before we get to our next question, we have someone offered a question from the audience. Okay, this is from Tomo Tomlinson. And his question is, as the developing world becomes more digitally connected, how much do those of us from the established digital world have to save in order to offset that growth? Interesting question. Matt, do you want to start?
Oh my gosh.
So
yeah, that's a tough one. And thank you for tuning in, Tomo. Great to see you in the chat. And a great question, because it is difficult. That is, I'll go back to the plastic. Do you have to give up the things that you love? Yes, you will have to give up the things that you love. And that is difficult. I drive a really old car. It's from 2007. Now, it might have less or more emissions because of that. But I choose to continue to use that thing because it's still a useful product. And the same thing goes for data and technology. What is useful, what is effective, and what is luxury? I think that's really kind of like the balance that you need to strike. The always on ERP is a great example where is that something that we actually need? Or is that something like, are we running a 24-hour operation where we're manufacturing 24 hours a day? Or is that something that we can actually pause and stop and save a bunch of money, resources, electricity, water, and time? And I think the answer is yes. We will have to give up things in order to offset the growth in other countries and other regions.
Yeah. And I said chaos previously when Matt was talking about kind of the disruption in the fashion and the manufacturing of stuff like that. I was recently watching, David Letterman was being interviewed, and he mentioned something about a different topic, but his response rings true here too, which is if we're overcorrecting somewhere, I think it's worth letting it happen and seeing what takes place. Because otherwise we're just remaining on a constant, potentially ignorant path. And I think that this is a very welcome disruption, right? And we think about often in my industry, disruptions to the market, right? We want to see more sales, more growth. But I think that this is a different ethical topic where disruption's necessary for humankind and the planet itself. So very welcome, in my opinion.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering the question from the chat. Appreciate that. And now we have another question. I'm really curious to see your perspective on this because it's happening right now in the news. If you've been following new regulations and the European Commission adopting new rules just July 31st. So this question is based around that. Given the dynamic of regulatory environment, how should IT strategies evolve to align with sustainability and compliance? And I also am curious because we have a global audience watching now, and it seems in the interviews that I've done that there's a lot more of this thought forward in the EU than in the US. It's evolving here. But but if you're in IT and you're in a global company, you really need to be up on everything. So, Sean, I'll start with you. How would you like to talk about that? Thanks.
Yeah, so representing a global company, it's something that comes up all the time. Just as an example, right, the product that I specifically work with, our ITSM platform, we need to be able to support GDPR. So we need to have compliance in Europe, whereas in North America, it's not the same. So availability of data centers is something, right? So just as a global company, something I think about, talk about, and it's an opening question with prospects every single day. But one of my favorite parts about the question, Bonnie, is dynamic, which, just to kind of expand or use some other terms for that, dynamic in many ways is fluid, right? Dynamic means being able to adapt. And so if we're going to relate that back to ITIL, right, something huge with ITIL 4 was kind of impressing a lot more of the Scrum and project management and Agile concepts of being flexible, being able to adapt quickly. So just a few, fancy buzzwords that will hopefully help me sound more intelligent than I potentially am is, just talking about our continual efforts of improvement. So continual improvement is a practice from an ITIL standpoint, and pairing that with the flexibility where we progress and progress iteratively with feedback, right? So if you pair those two things together, just at a super high level ITIL concepts, applying those to these same regulatory constraints. I don't even want to call them constraints because they're here not to constrain us, but to help us sustain us as a planet. But applying those same concepts is critical, right? And to be that cheesy ITIL guy, as I put in my bio, a silly statement of they call me Mr. ITIL, which nobody does. I apply those same concepts to my everyday life, right? If let's put something as practical as doing the dishes, right? Is there a way I could be doing them better, more efficient? Can I save water by, doing the dishes more frequently or doing them all at once? And then seeing how it goes, right? Progress iteratively with feedback and always be focused on that continual improvement. Same applies to our energy consumption, our sustainability, our compliance with those policies, and being flexible as a global company. It's not going to be the same in every region. Every place that the product could be distributed may have different standards. What I would love to see is the ability to say which one has the most ethical, most restricted, and again, I don't like saying words like restricted because it sounds negative and it's not intended to be, but the most thoughtful even of the regulations, right? And then spread that globally, even if it's not necessary in North America, for example, right? If we can be more compliant because compliance is there to protect folks, can we get away with it here too, just so we're offering a higher level, a higher standard, even if it's not required? So being a global organization, something I see every day. And again, to loop things back into an ITIL standpoint, always focus on improvement and always try to progress and collect that feedback throughout the journey.
Matt, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I had Antonina Klensova. I forget her new married name. I'm sorry, Antonina. I had her on the podcast, and she had a great analogy or a great story that made me connect what sustainability means to IT, and it's very similar to security. So if you remember when security started becoming a very important aspect of what IT was, maybe 10 years ago, I want to say, we realized we kind of got our start in security by making it a program or a project. We're going to try it here. We're going to do it here. Eventually, we realized that security needs to be something that we're all doing all the time. The same can be said for sustainability. It's not something that you can just pick a specific project and it's going to apply to a specific in a specific way. Now, there are projects, of course, where it's more important than others. But going back to your question specifically around the regulations, yeah, the EU is definitely owning the Yankees over here in the US because there are so many standards. It's almost head spinning to the point where you've got, here, I've got them written down. SDR, CSRD, SFDR. There's all these acronyms, and all we have in the US kind of is the SEC announcing more regulations if you're over a specific size or of a specific revenue level, which I think is great. The point, though, is this isn't changing anything. All that this is doing is requiring transparency, which I think is a great start. And that really is where service management ties into this, because we have so much of the information around power consumption, waste. We have the systems that can start collecting this information. Did you drive into work today? How many miles did you go? What make, model, and year of your car did you use? What gasoline did you buy? You can already see like the form that you're going to fill out so that they can tell if you should be coming into work more or less to meet their ESG initiatives and levels. So I think IT is poised because it's such an informational change at this point. And then once we get past, I'll say, the beginnings of sustainability, then it's going to come down to leadership, revenue-facing services, and revenue-facing product and service management.
That makes sense. No, I think that's a good point. And I just want to let you know, we do have a question from the audience. It's about AI, which is not something I had on my agenda to talk about, but I think it's really important that we do. The participants wondering where AI stands in IT in terms of sustainability, with greater GPU, HPU usage for AI that is not often green versus carbon savings for end users in terms of more efficient, automated, and AI-driven outcomes. So it's more of a kind of a concern, like an issue I think we could talk about. Sean, I didn't mean to cut you off. Why don't you go ahead and
No, absolutely. I was gonna just make a comment to Matt's real quickly. My dream when I'm done with human interactions and being part of an industry is to have a battery powered lawn or landscaping company and charging my batteries with solar power, right? So, it's just like my weekend dream. I'm like, man, I want my own lawn business. It's all green powered, right? Kind of thinking of a green name for a green, clean anyway. All right. So talking about AI here. So the question about AI, it is, I don't have statistics or math on this, but there's different ways to look at something like that, where I like to think of AI or virtual agents as employees that never sleep, right? And an employee that can answer 1 to 1,000 or more conversations at any given moment. So considering that, I think that the demand of volume, right, of requests that are hitting that will make it start to become, in a balance, far more efficient than the humans sitting there with the lights on waiting to answer a question that may or may not come in, as well as that same person's going to have to hit a search engine or a database to find the answer to respond to things that the AI can do, as well as from a remediation aspect, it's still going to need to remediate a potential outage that AI is then just going to do faster, not consuming more resources to do it, but do it quicker. And that outage that it's recovering from may have had its own impact to the environment. So the expediency that AI can remediate potential environmental disasters and prevent environmental disasters, there's an incredible amount of benefits to AI. Of course, it's all still a balancing act. Flexibility and considerations. If you're a small company only answering one question a day, then AI might cost, from both a financial and resource perspective, much more than someone to be able to respond to that. So it's definitely a balance. Again, I don't have numbers on how monetarily or wattage wise it's expensive to run AI and in what scenario, but it's a balancing act. And I do believe that an ethical use of that, especially given different purposes like preventing outages for things that may impact the environment specific to this topic, it's huge in its benefits to us.
Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And this kind of goes to Tomo's question before. Are we going to have to give up some luxury to balance sustainability and profitability? And that the answer is yes, you do have to. You have to choose. And you look at the amount of power it takes to do a Google query versus ask Google Bard. And there are times where you're going to have to say, no, we shouldn't be using this technology. It's too cost inefficient. It uses too many resources. And so it really creates this, it's a moral question, an ethical question. Should we be doing this? And it'll come to our end users too. How many of us have heard end users complain about slow computers, slow laptops? Well, maybe they're more efficient that way. Maybe they use less power that way. Maybe they cause less greenhouse gases that way. And that is going to be the balance you have to strike, because you need people to do the work and you need revenue to stay in business. So create the right balance so that you're not, creating infinitesimal amounts of revenue without paying the right amount of people. You don't want to create that imbalance. It ends up being all about systems thinking. Are we creating an ecosystem? Sean, your lawn business, I hate to poke holes in your dreams, but the most sustainable lawn is no lawn at all.
Okay, fair enough.
That's great. Great point and great analogies too. I wanted to move on to some individual questions for each of you since we're at the halfway point. Sean, we kind of talked about the joke about you being Mr. Idle, but as someone who passionately embraces Idle, how do you believe Idle principles can contribute to enhancing sustainability in IT operations?
So since it says principles, I guess that's a nice cue up for ITIL guiding principles, of which there are 7. And the first one I think that comes to mind, because we're talking about things of regulation, sustainability, and such a global conversation right now, is think and work holistically, which is, again, one of the 7 ITIL guiding principles, right? And what that really is talking about is taking your people, taking your partners, your technology itself, and then regulations, right? So these 4 major factors, and it's talking about thinking and working holistically, putting them together. So that's just a mindset, right? Think and work holistically. It's a mindset. We have to make sure we're considering all of these variables. And so when we think about how they apply to sustainability, again, I will never not bring up continual improvement and progressing with feedback, because those 2 are, everyone says they know, but under practiced. They are very under practiced because everyone ends up accidentally getting so focused on operations and the current fire at stake. But if we're thinking and working holistically, which is just, it should be an ever-present mindset, right? And then always trying to apply ourselves to how could we be doing this better. A good analogy for this, when we're talking practically about IT operations, is incidents and problems. Right. If we're going to say that continual improvement is a often neglected, under practiced ITIL concept, problem management as a very simple practice, in my opinion, is even more so undervalued. Because if we're thinking about what is an incident versus a problem, I have analogies for this. An incident is the fire and a problem is the spark. So if we're just trying to put out the fire over and over and over again, but that spark was never addressed, I'm going to be putting out fires forever, right? And so operations does have to take a hit, so to speak, right? In theory, right? If we're talking about it from this analogy standpoint, so that we can make time to focus on, okay, let's take care of this spark. Something's going to have to burn while I take care of turning this spark off, because it's going to contribute to our ability to stop the fires in the future, right? And that's what creates sustainability, right? Sustainability has to come from making a sacrifice on what you're doing today to make an improvement for tomorrow. And so again, relating things back to IT operations, we need to make sure, because of this specific topic, that we're always thinking and working holistically, but we need to make the balance of where can we make improvements and at what cost. Going back to that question earlier, we have to make certain sacrifices, balance risk. What's the risk if I don't put out this fire, right? Well, it's got its own cost, but if I don't take care of the spark, then I'm going to have 7 more tomorrow.
That's a great point. All right. Well, now we will ask Sean his question. I'm sorry, that was Sean. I'm sorry, Matt. Considering your diverse roles in service management and product marketing, can you talk about how these areas intersect to drive sustainability for Matt?
Yeah, service management and product marketing. Yes. I think the thing that I've learned from product marketing is similar to the phrase I just said. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So often in marketing, we are tempted to create mountains of content and, measure everything to the nth degree. And I want people to use those guiding principles from ITIL to question that. Focus instead upon value. What is the value of the content that you're putting out? What is the value of the measurement that you're doing? Is it actually impacting your revenue to know that someone clicks on something specific and takes a specific journey to buy your product or to make a change? And so I think a lot of times we overmeasure. We look at, I mean, it's common in service management to use vanity metrics. We're just addicted to our numbers. And not always do we need them. Not always does knowing what's working change our path and change our ways of working. And the same can be said for all of our business decisions. We may not necessarily see, like, you get the trend. If we do this, revenue goes up. If we do this, revenue goes up, and it's just consistent. That's like a law you can develop. Stop measuring it, especially if it's costing you money to measure it, if it's costing ecological decline to measure it. And then in service management and experience design, it all comes back to the values. What is the meaning of our business? Who are we? What do our leaders believe we're doing? What is our mission, vision, and value for the company? And are we actually delivering it? Or are we just saying those are our vision, mission, and value, and we really just want to make a ton of money? It's kind of a tough one to get to, but it's those come to Jesus moments, those revolutionary moments, the catharsis of change that needs to happen for people to realize that what your company does is a direct reflection of who your company is and who the people are that work for your company.
Matt, I love that you said that. And I just want to touch on that real quick. Working with my product marketing team quite a bit lately, we talk about those vanity numbers. And the thing that hit home for me with what you said was about what is our core values, what's our goal, what are our business requirements. And a lot of times we get distracted thinking about, webinars, for example. Am I doing this because I want 150 registrants, 2,000 registrants, or is it because of those 2,000 registrants, I actually want demand to come from them? And we get distracted by the wrong number, which doesn't focus on value, right? So getting distracted by the wrong number of why we're doing something is so important. And again, to bring a practical aspect back to IT operations, a way I present this when talking about reporting. So I often work with customers or prospects asking, can you do this? Or how should I do this? And I'll say, I have this report. Can you make this happen again? And the first thing I ask is why. But if I do decide, yes, I think that we want to make this, instead I say, can you ask me the question of what this report is trying to tell a story for, right? Because oftentimes they're so addicted to that one graphic, they think they need it, when in reality, the story that a report is telling isn't a necessary story we need to tell. So it should always come back to a question of what story are you trying to tell? Where's the value? All right, now let's see if the numbers can tell us the story of that value.
Great. We are starting to get some good questions coming in. So I want to pose that. Thank you for everyone in the chat that's been asking them. The first one is talking about vanity numbers. How do you see service levels? This is from participant 584, by the way, talking about vanity numbers. How do you see service levels working to drive down energy use and GHG emissions, considering there are so many external factors?
I would love to take
Matt,
a
do you
crack
want to
at
start
this
on it?
one.
Yeah,
I would
whoever
love
wants
to
to.
take a
Yeah.
crack at this. So SLAs, I'm very passionate about, and one of the reasons is because I've come from both types of environments where SLAs were created as part of a contract. And talk about vanity numbers, they were actually there to gouge a vendor, right? A lot of times in contracts, SLAs aren't intended to improve services, but intended to trap contractors or someone on the other side of a contract to create financial repercussions, right? And that's not ethical in the creation of those SLAs. More so, one of the reasons that I'm passionate about is because I'm trying effortlessly to and just kidding, to convince folks that SLAs are intended to just be measurements for you to improve, for you to measure. So they're there for you to say, here's where I want to be, right? And even if you're coming in green and saying I don't have any, set some based off of what is your average, right? Get it tighter, right? And those should be things that you're trying to shrink constantly, not to the point where you're making yourself uncomfortable or it's not sustainable, buzzword, right? But the idea behind the SLAs is to constantly use them as measurements to improve yourself. So I don't like to think of SLAs more than just measurements, goals, right? You can take away some of that scary feeling when you say SLA and say it's a goal, to help you improve yourself, right? It's just giving you targets. Service level targets was another name for them that you can find, but they're intended targets for you to measure against to see how you're doing so you can improve.
Yeah. If you pause your SLAs, is it a true, accurate representation of the service level? I think not. And so many service management organizations are pausing SLAs, and we're guilty of it too. As a vendor that makes a ticketing system, we allow people to pause SLAs based on conditions. But I do want to say that this comes back to the value that you need to balance. It's like the service of a slow laptop being a bad performance. Is it ecological? And that is the balance you need to strike. Maybe your service levels are going to take a hit because you're sustainable. Your customers and your employees need to buy into that because it's your mission, vision, value to be that sustainable service provider.
Great.
Okay.
That's appreciate that. We have another question from participant 154. Are there any emerging trends or innovations in service management that can further accelerate an organization's journey towards greater sustainability? Sean, you want to start on that?
Sure. I like this one. I'm an analogy guy. So what came to mind for me to present this one was public transportation, because it was perfect for talking about energy efficiency. So when we think about public transportation, I'm leveraging a service that's already there being utilized by other people to get from destination A to B. And SaaS, or software as a service, I'm trying to think of in contrast to that or relation to that, right? Rather than me and in my own energy inefficient building and my organization trying to run my own servers and perform on older technology where I don't have the most energy efficient AC, HVAC, right? Or even technology itself that's running the applications, right? Rather than me doing that, leveraging as a service, the folks who have the best technology are already managing this the most efficient way possible, right? I did some quick number gathering, and I'm not going to cite them here because I don't want to be inaccurate, but just as an example, AWS themselves, Amazon Web Services, has so many of their own initiatives publicly posted and their own goals, their own targets of where they want to be in contrast to these regulations, saying we will be this energy efficient by this year. I can guarantee you they're already better than me or any organization I've worked for in the past at energy efficiency. And I'm utilizing something that's already in place, whether I'm going to touch it or not. So it's just, again, reducing my carbon footprint by leveraging something that exists as a service. And so I think talking about trends, that's been a trend for quite a while now, I'd say easily a decade, leveraging things as a service. but it's smart. It makes sense. And again, just to do an analogy, it's relating back to public transportation in this sense, something that already exists. Other people are using it. We're both getting from our destination to another destination, even though it's different from someone else's. We're on the same ride. And this can go beyond just software as a service, but identity and security, right? Let the pros at what they do be the pros at what they do, and you conduct your business leveraging their assistance.
That's such a great way to put it, Sean. It really, it's about service design. And we saw it in the DevOps space for a long time. Microservices, right? Let the team focus on their inputs and their outputs and let them do what they do best. So right sourcing is definitely one of the things that you want to focus on and think about. 809, I totally am jiving with you, participant 809 in chat. Make the decisions. You know, you have to make this part of your requirements to say, we need to drive down our power usage, or we need to drive down our carbon emissions, or even simpler stuff like, hey, we don't want to save this data forever. How do we actually flatten our database files so that we're using less resources? And someone else commented about legacy infrastructure apps and services. How much does it cost to run an Oracle cluster these days? How much does it cost to hire PCI developers, or what's the old programming language that I'm thinking of that runs all the financial transactions? COBOL. How much does it cost to train and support COBOL applications, however you want to pronounce it? And so not only do your requirements from your projects have to incorporate these as goals and requirements, but you need to think about your existing legacy applications. Time to start thinking about your ERP differently. That's the title of my responses today.
And
That
really
sounds
quickly,
good.
just to close
Oh,
that,
sure.
if I
Okay.
can,
And then we
Bonnie.
have one more question from the audience.
Absolutely. In talking about a balance, which I think everything about this conversation today is a balance, but that antiquated legacy technology, now we're talking about refresh cycles. That's another trend in this, right? Refresh cycles have gotten more rapid. I'm hoping that they expand because we're getting rid of older technology. And thinking about a new car comes out every year, right? That's waste in many ways. But as the technology has gotten to a point today, that same technology has many ways to stretch much longer than the older technology did. So there's going to be a balance of, okay, we need to get rid of legacy stuff, but now that we've got more modern technology, we can make this modern technology stretch longer so that we're not doing so much waste of refreshing every 2 to 3 years, right? Anyway, I know we're shorter on time, but I did want to just put that on because the physical technology itself is such a huge part of this, and it's definitely a trending thing.
Bingo.
Great. Thank you for adding that, Sean. Another question from someone in the audience, participant 975, is asking, should we demand a sustainability statement as part of our service design package? Can we carry on committing to new service without knowing its impact and the cost of decommissioning? Good question.
Yeah, I think it comes down to where you're at in your governance journey. Are you actually mature and already at this point? Then yes, like you will need to do it. And what I recommend is that, you know, the companies that are investing in this already have an ESG initiative. They've got someone specifically assigned to this topic, and hopefully they're already working with IT. If they're not, and you've heard about it, now is the time to get involved with them and start partnering with them. They will come up with the templates and requirements needed to fulfill this and operationalize it. So, yes.
Yeah, and from ITIL, I'm eager to see energy-specific sustainability stuff become more part of the practices. But yeah, looking forward to it. It definitely should be something.
Great. We have another participant, 146, has a question. Should we also consider non-tech people when talking about service management sustainability? We'd like to know each of your thoughts on that. Matt?
100%. Yeah. We know that service management goes well beyond IT now, right? There is the IT operations, the ITIL aspects of our jobs, but there's also service management, how the company delivers services, how HR, finance, legal, all of our teams provide services. So you definitely need to think beyond IT. And so, working with those experts and figuring out what initiatives they're working on and how they can be impacted. This is why I believe that ESG is its own thing. It needs to partner with service management across the organization and be broader, not focused.
And as experts, and I will say this with hubris, right? As IT is the experts in service management, I really think that IT kind of created the standard for what is delivering services. They've got tools dedicated to it, frameworks for it. So as leaders and experts in service management, I like to take it on as our responsibility to help nurture service management and best practice thinking to those other service providers, and try and share those practices, those mindsets, the ITIL guiding principles with everyone. Because again, as I teased earlier, right, I use guiding principles for my day-to-day life. And there's no reason they can't be used to improve everyone's service delivery, no matter what it is.
That's great. I like the way you are able to relate what we do in everyday life to work too. So thank you for that, Sean. I'm wondering if both of you could kind of look towards the future and maybe evaluate what you're seeing now in terms of upcoming trends or technologies in the field of sustainable IT practices that organizations should be aware of. You guys might be able to see something that we don't that's coming down the pike. So Matt, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the big one is systems that turn off. But of course, we have the technology. The iPhone 14 now starts up in 10 seconds. It used to take, I don't know if you remember, but it used to take a long time for your iPhone to start up. And the same thing goes for servers. We don't need to spin them all the way down all the time, right? They can go into those hibernate states, those pause states. And what we need to do is decide to implement that into our designs. And so that's really what I see as coming down the innovation highway, is that people will be changing the way that they design and deliver services.
I'll agree. And Matt brought up kind of something to echo what we've been talking about. And to answer this, I feel like a lot of it will be echoes of things we've already said. Turning the lights off, using smart technology, the new, more modern technology. Another analogy, I replaced my HVAC, which is very costly, as an investment to save energy and money, right? So, an HVAC unit from 2008 is incredibly less efficient than a brand new HVAC unit. I'm not telling everybody to go get new AC, but it is quite nice, especially with, a smart thermostat. So smart technology is huge. To echo again, the work from home aspect, right? The more remote world that we live in. These are things that are obviously trending, and it's kind of, I won't say taking a negative turn, but trying to correct itself back into how things were prior to the pandemic. I think we have an opportunity to continue to, I don't want to say struggle, but it can be a struggle, but to discuss what is best, right? To identify that it shouldn't always be a black and white conversation of it is this, it is that, right? It's always growing. And we talk about that dynamic nature of this, dynamic regulatory requirements. The same thing should be true with these discussions, right? I think every year an organization should evaluate their work from home remote policy, just as an example. But there's a lot of things that we can echo when it comes to it. More trends would be, SaaS, application-based, and the technology itself connecting to something else rather than running it, the applications themselves is less costly, right? If I'm connecting to an application that, again, was already running somewhere else, my device isn't doing it. And on the note of devices, BYOD is another aspect of it. Rather than organizations paying for more technology, again, most people have smartphones. Most people already have computers. So leveraging technology to secure their devices instead of duplicating a device is a great way to reduce footprint. Because if my home computer's on and I have to have my work computer on, now I've doubled my carbon footprint when it comes to running that technology, when I could just say, okay, organization, can you comp me for my device on a regular basis? And I'll just use what I have. Right. That way it's coming out of a wallet rather than the ecosystem of, energy.
Yeah, you pinged my memory too that what I've seen is there are organizations that now are questioning whether they should ship hardware around.
Absolutely.
Like docking stations is a perfect example. After 3 years of usage, those things aren't necessarily brand new anymore. Do we need to actually spend the CO2 to get that from one place to another, or can we just eat the cost and write it off? Um, there's tons. There's almost too many examples of what you can do, and that's why I keep going back to that holistic and service design perspective, because it has to be intrinsic in everything that you do. Otherwise, it will never become something that you can achieve.
Okay, great. I was just going to ask you a question, but then somebody jumped in and we got a new question from them. Participant 556 is asking, what if we integrated into IDLE 4 something like sustainability by design and compliance, ESG, by default?
I would love that. That was what I was mentioning earlier. I don't necessarily see anything environmentally specific in ITIL today, but something that did change, which I'm a huge fan of, and is arguably just as or more important, is about the human element of things, which ITIL 4 did massive changes in contrast to ITIL version 3. So ITIL itself is evolving the way that all of this should, in a dynamic nature now, where it's no longer versions, right? It's ITIL 4, not ITIL version 4. So it's an iterative best practice guidance itself. And the human element and culture is a big word that started to show up in ITIL 4. So along with that, I'm hoping that environmentally, we're considering that as part of ITIL, and that best practice standards are beginning to kind of sneak their way in. I think that that's going to be a interesting thing to see grow, because it, as Matt mentioned, it's its own thing that needs to be in parallel with service management. And it does have its own set of regulations, requirements. So it definitely will be difficult, but setting standards for considering ESG, I think is a must. And I would not be surprised if ITIL already had things in the works.
They do. There is an ITIL 4 specialist called Sustainability in Digital and IT. And it is basically that. It's meant to, I think it's meant to kind of prepare service management professionals for the chaos that's coming, the VUCA, the volatility
Right.
of what we expect to be in the world. Definitely, if you haven't checked out, I'm going to plug it again, the
We'll
Ticket
have
Volume
to.
podcast episode that I've linked in handouts. Antonina's one of the authors of this book. So definitely take a look. She's definitely on the edge of what we're talking about. And I challenge you, if you listen to it, not to get excited, because it just gets me amped up.
Well, we only have, no, it's, you both have great podcasts and I'm looking forward to listening to them. We have just a few minutes left. This has gone by so fast because we've had amazing participation, which I'm so happy about. So on a final note, okay, could each of you just share one short practical recommendation for businesses looking to intensify their commitment to sustainability within their IT operations? Just give us a good tip and everybody's on the edge of their seats.
You go, Sean.
Okay. Sean?
Practical recommendation to intensify their commitment to sustainability. I'll tap back into that guiding principle I mentioned kind of towards the top of the call, which is think and work holistically. Have that always ever present in your mind, because we shouldn't just be thinking about our problem we're trying to solve right now, but everyone else and how it impacts them, the regulations, the impact on other parts of the business, right? So thinking and working holistically, and tapping back in again to progress iteratively with feedback. So always think more than just you, more than just your problem, and always change, right? Always try to see if there's areas to grow, to change, and be aware that that change comes with a risk. It may not work, but that's okay. We made a small change. We tried it. We got feedback, and now let's snap back from that and try again. Don't be afraid.
You've heard the phrase during, sorry to cut you off, Sean.
No, please.
You've heard the phrase low hanging fruit, and I hate those business axioms, but really that's what you need to do. Start the research, talk to your customers, talk to your employees, make sure you interview your leaders, understand what they're feeling about sustainability and the situation of climate change, and your ability to sustain as a business. So you want to capture those diverse thoughts and emotions and perspectives so that you know where the low-hanging fruit is. After a few discussions, you may find that this is something that not only aligns with your mission, vision, and values, but it's something that your customers are in high demand for. You may even find a specific niche, however you want to say that word. You may find that that is a way to differentiate yourself, a way to go to market specifically differently, and a strategy that your business can leverage.
Great. We are just getting really great comments from the audience. Everyone's really just on the edge of their seat listening to these tips because they're so helpful. And the hour flew by. I don't know for everyone else, but it seems like it did for me. Fascinating conversation. Somebody just wrote in, we could talk about this all day. I agree. And a lot of the audience are saying they want to continue the conversation. And I'm so glad that we're getting it going here on People's Start Skill Up Sessions. I want to thank our panelists now, Matt Barron, Senior Project Marketing Specialist. Is it Invigate or Invigate? I didn't want to say it wrong. Invigate. See, it's like missing a vowel, but that's okay. I got it. Matt, great conversation. Don't forget to check out, Matt, what's the name of your podcast again?
Ticket Volume.
Ticket Volume. Okay, great. We have the links here as well. And Sean Sebring, Solutions Architect, ITSM SolarWinds. Also, Sean, would tell them about your podcast once more so people
Yes,
can.
thank you, everyone, in SolarWinds Tech Pod. Check it out.
Okay, great. So this was a wonderful conversation. I thank both my esteemed panelists and everyone that participated from all over the world. Your questions and comments were so valuable. And we're going to continue the journey and the conversation about sustainable IT. Thank you for joining us on How Service Management Helps with learning and PeopleCert for hosting this and our Skill Up session. I'm Bonnie Schneider. You can find more about the work I'm doing on the Techstrong group at ecotechinsights.com. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye now.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you.